Hello, and welcome to another 5 Good Minutes, in which I answer your theological questions in 5 minutes or less. Today's question wrestles with the topic of God's sovereignty and human freedom. Do we have free will even if God is sovereign? And does He order our steps even when we sin? This is a great question, but I believe, before I fully explain, that the 1689 Second London Baptist Confession of Faith summarizes it beautifully. This is what it says in paragraph 1 of chapter 3. From all eternity, God decreed everything that occurs without reference to anything outside Himself. He did this by the perfectly wise and holy counsel of His own will, freely and unchangeably. Yes, from all eternity, from eternity past, God decreed. That means He determined everything that occurs. And He does this without reference to anything outside Himself, meaning God does not make decisions based on our decisions. He has a plan, He's telling a story, and He accomplishes that story and plan without regard to anyone or anything. And He did this according to the holy counsel of His own will, freely and unchangeably. In fact, we could say that God is the only creature with ultimate free will. But you may say, Dan, everything? What about our sin? Well, the confession continues, yet God did this in such a way that He is neither the author of sin nor has fellowship with any in their sin. Even though we struggle with our freedom and God's sovereignty, you're like, well, I chose that. I wanted to do that. No one forced me to do that. You're right. You act in accordance with your will, but even your will is ordered by God. Even the decisions you make, God allows and decrees that they happen. A classic example of this is Joseph in the book of Genesis. Here's Joseph. It was God's plan for him to get to Egypt. He was sold as a slave, hated by his brothers, left for dead, lied about, in jail, rises to the top in Pharaoh's house. All that was ordained by God. No one denies that. But then at the end of the story, we find Joseph confront his brothers. And his brothers are scared that Joseph is going to kill them now that their dad is dead. And this is what Joseph says to them. He says, "As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today." You see, it was the brothers who sinned. It was the brothers who did what they wanted to do. It was Potiphar's wife who lied about him. But yet all of that was ordained by God to happen. We see this in verses like Proverbs 21:1. The king's heart is a stream of water in the hand of the Lord. He turns it wherever He will. And it is God who is guiding us there through the free actions of these people. God is the first cause of all things. The reason everything happens is because of God. We are the second cause. So the first cause, the second cause. God does not join us in our sin. God does not participate in sin. He's not the author of sin. He does not cause us to sin. But He's ordained, He's decreed that our sin would happen to bring about His purposes. A classic example of that is the story of Jesus. He says in Acts 4:27 and 28, "For truly in a city they were gathered together against your holy servant Jesus, whom you anointed, both Herod and Pontius Pilate, along with the Gentiles and the people of Israel, to do whatever your hand and your plan had predestined to take place." Here's Peter preaching about these people who killed Jesus. And they're the ones who killed Jesus. But what are they doing? They're doing whatever your hand and your plan had predestined to take place. They did from their freedom what God had planned and ordered to take place. If you could do whatever you want apart from God's sovereign will, then why does James say in James chapter 4, in verse 15, "What is your life? For you are a mist that appears for a little time and then vanishes." Instead, you ought to say, "If the Lord wills, we will live and do this or that." Why do we live tomorrow? Because the Lord has ordained it. Why do we do this or that? Because the Lord has ordained it. He has decreed it. God is sovereign. It does not violate human freedom. Human freedom is ordained even by God. This has been another 5 Good Minutes.